Thank you for joining us for this Idaho Environmental Forum short. I'm Jared Talley at Boise State University and an IEF board member. Today I'm joined by Dr. Emily Wakild, the Cecil D. Andrus Endowed Chair for Environment and Public Lands in the School of Public Service at Boise State University. And we'll be talking about a recent conference that they put on called Recreating Public Land Recreation. Idaho Environmental Forum is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational association whose sole mission is to promote serious, cordial, and productive discourse on a broad range of environmental policies affecting Idaho. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our 2023 sponsors for making discussions like this possible. You can find them on our website at idahoenvironmentalforum, all one word, .org. Okay, with that, I'd like to get to know you, Emily. I'd like to know more about you. What drives you to do this work, and what's maybe special about your position that you hold in the Andrus Center?
Well, I have the best job in the world because it brings together my interest in education and also the ways that I do research and want to celebrate publicly public goods like public lands. I grew up in this area and so have really been a part of the Idaho broader environmental community for decades. And so it gives me great pleasure to work professionally in this area. And I'm really interested in understanding why conservation has such a big legacy in Idaho and the ways that it impacts communities, individuals, and our state more broadly.
Yeah, they always say Idaho votes red until it's about the environment, right? And then we're purple. And I think that Cecil D. Andrus had a lot to play with that. And the Andrus Center is a legacy of Cecil D. Andrus. Can you talk a little about what the Andrus Center is and its mission?
Absolutely. So the Andrus Center, like the namesake, takes up the principal causes that Idaho's only four-term governor championed when he was in office, and he also served as Secretary of the Interior under President Jimmy Carter. And those issues are education for everybody, leadership from all segments of the population, and environment, stewarding the resources for the future so that we can use them, enjoy them, but also make sure that they're in place. And so those three main legacy points thread through all of the work that we do. So conferences that are put on, conversations that are convened, and then the research agenda that comes out of the center that I'm in charge of as well. And all of that, threads into distinct segments of our population, but also celebrates the ways that we can come together on these issues because they affect and impact everyone, and they're a place for important public dialogue.
And I think that's kind of what the point of these conferences are that you host every year about the environment. And this year was about recreation, which we all know in Idaho is a very important piece of our conversation. Can you just kind of briefly describe what the event was and maybe the purpose of it?
Absolutely. So the Andrus Center has been convening environmental conferences since the early 1990s, and we always try and pick a topic that people can move forward on, right? That there can be some agreement to sort of push it ahead in the public sphere, maybe get some collaborative legislation or funding, but that we can make it move and have the conversation that will forward that progress, right? That idea. And recreation is one of those topics right now that everybody is thinking about, right? More people than ever, more Americans are outside recreating than historically have ever been. And with that, we should celebrate that, right? That's kind of the best of times. And we want to make sure that that possibility is there. But it also creates challenges because funding overall is declining while use is spiking. And the pressure on really amenity-rich communities across the state of Idaho and in other Western states are in this sort of crux where they have the public lands people want to recreate on, but maybe they don't have the tools to get the trails built, or maybe what it'll take to get some infrastructure in place is 3 years behind where the demand is. And so there's this really interesting cross-jurisdictional space where people are talking to each other to figure out how to get those things done. And because there's that opportunity, we wanted to be able to convene a conversation to figure out where those possibilities are, who's done it well, and what recommendations might be made on a bigger scale.
So you mentioned this cross-jurisdictional space. Thank you. Can you who was at the conference? Like, how was that represented in the conference itself? Maybe any notable figures?
Yeah, so the conference was populated by people on the ground and sort of policymakers and thinkers. So we had everybody from Bureau of Land Management, district manager, one out of Phoenix, for example, to the governor of Idaho and the former governor of Montana. One of the keynote speakers was Tracy Stone Manning, the current director of the Bureau of Land Management, and she was introduced by Mayor Lauren McLean to talk about the BLM partnership with the city, for example. And so we had the superintendent of Yellowstone, and we had Sammy Matzoff from the Fort Hall tribal community to talk about recreation in those spaces as well. And what we tried to do was populate the conversation with multiple scales and multiple perspectives. So user groups and state and local entities were all represented, and the challenge of the conference was to keep the conversation high, right? And to not get into the very specific details of one particular place, but to think about what those collaborations look like overall and how recreation is something that folks can come together on, because it impacts, and it's such a broad range of uses for the amenity that is our public lands.
So I have kind of a two-part for you. The first is, what was maybe the biggest takeaway or your favorite part of the conference for you? But then the second part is, what do you hope to get out of this conference, or what do you hope to see come from this event?
So I think my favorite part was the panel on foundations, and I learned a tremendous amount about the National Forest Foundation, which is the funding mechanism for forwarding Forest Service work, and the new Bureau of Land Management Foundation, which will help fund and forward Bureau of Land Management projects. So Mary Mitsos and Steve Bullock had a conversation around the foundations. And for me, that really illuminated some of the innovative ways people are thinking about working outside and in partnership to get things done and projects funded on the ground. And that was really illuminating for me. And I appreciated having that insight and really that sort of new forward-looking piece as part of the conversation. And I forgot the second part of your question.
What do you see, or what do you hope comes from this? What do you see going into the future?
So the Andrus Center conferences always have a transcript and a white paper that becomes available. And so we're working on that report or conference report to come out of it. And I hope that there's a piece that goes on to further the conversation from those findings. The report will have the major takeaways from the conference, so probably around 10 top takeaways, and then we'll pick the ones that we think can move something in the public sphere and perhaps have a pilot of those recommendations. The idea is to inform policymakers, but I'm also trying to think carefully too about how to share out and interpret the results throughout the state. And so hopefully we'll have a creative approach for thinking about how we might do that as well.
Well, I want to give you just a little bit of space as we wrap up here to maybe make a plug for the Andrus Center and maybe how people and folks that are watching this can engage with or future events in the Andrus Center.
Absolutely. So the Andrus Center is a known and respected place to convene cross-party dialogues about pressing issues. And we have at least 2 conferences a year, Women in Leadership in the fall and an environmental conference in the spring. And they're open to everyone and a really exciting way to be in the room for these conversations. We're working on having virtual and in-person attendance. And this recreation was a really exciting time to be back in person. You can go to the Andrus Center website and sign up for our newsletter, or contact us if you're interested in volunteering or helping to shape or planning any of these. And then if you're a student, we're also looking for student engagement. We have a number of student-based programs, so you can find those on our website as well.
Well, thank you, Emily, and thank you to our IEF members for joining us for this forum short. If you have an idea for a forum short or a forum event, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at ief@idahoenvironmentalforum.org. And another shout out to our 2023 sponsors. We couldn't do any of this without you. If you'd like to join our group of generous supporters, please reach out to us.